Hello to my fellow history lovers and people that think if I learn something new, it will be a good day. This is an essay from the Picket Post, which is from the Valley Forge Historical Society. This was written almost 50 some years ago, and it was about Washington's finest hours. And there were two incidents, and I already talked about one, which was the Nicolay incident, where one of the officers in George Washington's army suggested he become king. And Washington just shut that down and said, we didn't fight for this. So he, just 10 weeks or 10 months later, hold on one second, 10 months later, and this actually will happen in March. And right now, maybe it's apropos because it's cold, it's gloomy, it's wet, and your spirits are kind of low. And maybe that fed into, because, you know, human psychology is a big part of the Revolutionary War. And maybe the officers are just at their lowest. It's cold, it's wet, there seems to be no end in sight, and they're not being paid. So the second big test to Washington will happen during this second incident. And I'm going to read to you what happens. Washington's second deed of greatness was accomplished at this very same Hudson setting 10 months after the Nicolay episode, and it was again centered around rebellious officers. The American encampment was pervaded with the unwholesome smell of mutiny. Officers stopped bowing to Washington and began to talk about him behind his back. They were angry at Congress, angry at the people whose freedom they had secured. They had not been paid in months, and they had begun to despair of the American cause. So on March 10th, a document of anonymous origin begins circulating through camp. It called for a meeting of the general and field officers the following day. Issued with the document was a fiery appeal, also of anonymous authorship, to the commission holders to assert their cause and demand compensation for their services. The firebrand author suggested that if the demands of the officers were not met, they should abandon Congress and become master of their destiny. So this is huge. This is basically a complete mutiny. In other words, we are going to basically become a military dictatorship here. So the next day, Washington walks in. We're going to have to do this in two parts. And he knows full well that the future of America might be decided before the day came to an end. His officers kept their eyes riveted on him as he entered the large wooden building. They did not bow or offer their usual courtesies. This was no time for conventions. Washington walked to the lectern, spread out his notes, and began. And we'll talk about this in part 2.